it. So, Adeline, I guess what I was curious about is it sounded like the curiosity that you were having in that situation with your friend, that you wanted to engage with her. And at some level, I have a friend of mine he's an atheist and I'm Christian. And we are both pretty, at some level, very much in agreement with our own values on those topics. And we have had numerous conversations on these very, very different versions of that. And we're still good friends. We still talk regularly. And so it sounded like that was kind of like you'd like to be able to engage in a safe way with your friends on topics that are important to them without it becoming an argument.
Absolutely, yeah. So, but the thing was for me, I realized I didn't want to engage because I already, in a way, decided that or calculated the time and energy involved. And at that point of that conversation, I wasn't wanting to do that because
Right, right.
I already felt like a tsunami coming. Every single word was a trigger. Puppet, comedian.
It sounds like you did the right thing then. I mean, there's always that, like, in a conversation like that, where if this is a friend and somewhere we're wanting to engage with, I've got a buddy of mine and we go to the gym 5 days a week, early in the morning. And there are some times when we disagree about things, but we get to go home. We can't just, stay at the gym and talk all day. So it's sometimes there's a time constraint in a conversation that we always have to be aware of. So in some cases, in order to have that rapport built around that and create that acknowledgement, it requires time. And if we don't have the time to do that, or if we recognize that we're triggered, like there are times when I'm with him and he'll say some stuff and I'll be like, one of my triggers is disrespect of children. I have a pretty intense trigger around like people just disrespecting children, mostly because I felt like it happened a lot when I was a child, and I still haven't totally worked through that. I don't like it when people talk badly about their children or how their children are being idiots or something, and I'm just like, that's not the way we need to think about that in order to be able to create change in that environment. Anyways, sometimes when that trigger happens, I'm aware, I can feel it, and I'm like, okay, I'm triggered right now, so let's just use some dynamic silence, and this is not a good time to talk. If I'm not triggered, then the other question is like, okay, like for us, he's got to head home at 6 a.m. So if it's getting close to that, it's like, okay, we've got 5 minutes to 6. There is not enough time right now to really get into this and to allow him to feel heard or acknowledged, in which case, doing the mirroring or something to be able to end the conversation as quickly as possible is important. So it really just becomes a pragmatic approach to the situation. Is this good timing?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe
So
maybe
James,
it's bad timing.
Mhm. From what you just described, I realized what I was doing was the flight response.
You were
I
feeling flooded.
decided, no, I ran away.
Oh, sorry. That
So
term
yeah.
is
So instead of fighting, which is or fighting or to engage, I did the reverse. I ran away. Basically, it's what I did.
the
Yeah.
running away. What's generally happening in that moment is there's something called an amygdala hijacking or emotional overwhelm or flooded. There's a bunch of different terms for it, but essentially when some part of our brain engages and we have that fight or flight response, our brain has been hijacked by the emotional center of our brain, and we can attack or we can run away. And that when I'm saying flooded, that's what I'm referring to. When we get into that fight or flight response, that's the um, psychologist's word that they use, like you were feeling flooded. And flooded
Yeah.
is psychological overwhelm or fight or flight
Yeah.
response. It's all the same. It's pointing at the
Yeah.
same reality that human beings are
Yeah.
experiencing in that. And in that
Yeah.
space, we lose about 30% of our intelligence. It's very difficult to be present. We're not
Yeah.
going to be very good at acknowledging other people.
Mhm.
And in those situations, in a flooded response, I feel like when you were
Yeah.
talking earlier about we're trying to learn the skills, it's for
Mhm.
when we're flooded. That's generally when these skills are very, very helpful, is when we're in a flooded mindset and we're not thinking super clearly. Can we respond in a caring way to the person that's in front of us when we're feeling flooded?
Absolutely. Yeah. And just a word about the situation. I felt as if someone gave me another triggering, as in saying the earth is flat.
Sure.
That kind of like is a fact. I'm telling you. So when faced with such a statement,
Mhm.
at first, okay, my jaw is dropped, but
Okay, it's pattern
emotionally,
interrupt with that. When your jaw drops, at that moment when your jaw drops, what is your internal experiencing that you're having? Like I say, the earth is flat. Fact.
right?
What, like, check in with yourself in that moment. What are you feeling? What's going through your head?
Yeah, I'm saying it's a tsunami. It's like
It's a tsunami. Okay, so
I cannot
that's
believe this person. I'm shocked, right? First, I think it's so shocked.
Adeline,
He's
I've got a
right.
humor response for this one, and it truly was one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my entire life. There was a Facebook group that said Flat Earth Society with members all around the globe, and I freaking lost it.
somebody didn't pay attention to geometry.
Yeah.
Globes are flat. Didn't you hear?
You know, when they make this kind of, what do you call these statements, like there's no buts about it. It's a black and white statement.
Right.
Right. So curiosity and relationship is like, if you want to enter into a frame, it's just like, okay, this person obviously. I remember I ran into this lady. She was Ubering me to the airport, and I eventually, like, I made the space was safe enough where she was like, yeah, the world is going to end in 87 days, and I was like, oh, okay, so obviously similar, like, okay. You just know that the Earth is going to end in 87 days. Like, you're crazy.
How about this? What if when they're throwing you these outrageous statements, you start with, "You're not wrong."
I don't say that because I feel like that's a lie.
Well,
But I
not no.
think,
Come on. Let me explain myself. It's not a lie because they believe that, and that's true for them, right? And you're not acknowledging it, like you're not saying you're right, but you're saying you're not wrong. So you're kind of validating it in a sense, saying,
right.
"Yeah, I mean, for you, it seems like it's an absolute another truth right now." Yes, it is. Well, you're not wrong.
I think whenever I feel like it's important, at least for me, whenever I'm saying anything, that I'm responsible for the words that I'm saying. And if I am saying something like that and I don't agree with it, there is an incongruency with my words and my current belief system. And that makes it difficult for me to, because I feel like that statement, if somebody is on the other side of that, is going to think that I believe what they're saying. And that's not necessary. I don't need to change my mindset in such a way to where I can say things to make them believe what I'm saying when it's not true. I think there's another approach where I can be authentic and honest without having that happen. Eckhart actually says something that in situations like that, that this is your test. So when people are doing that line, like when somebody says something like, you know, the world is going to end in 87 days or the world is flat.
Oh, James, I noticed something, and I've been doing this too for a long time. It's actually Adeline.
Adeline?
I N9 for some reason has been mislabeling Adeline to be Adeline, and I don't know why or how it's.
I don't correct Americans because you know, Line is Caroline, or also
Right.
I just left it. But yeah.
Oh, I much prefer to say it correctly.
to.
Thank you, Doug.
Yeah. No, I was wrong for a long time about that, and many other things, by the way.
But James, this is a pattern interruption from Douglas.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. He's correcting something that I would feel bad about if I had known.
I did too. I felt like an idiot. I was like, oh man, I can't believe I've been that wrong for that long about that. I'm sorry.
Let me ask you something, because you know the Earth is flat. That's already proven. Like, you have scientific facts around this, yeah.
So,
but if there is a
Scientific
statement,
facts?
there is.
So in the context of that, with the scientific fact, when there's obviously like truth around that, it no longer becomes about having a conversation. Well, I call it a conversation or a discussion. We're not trying to reach, like, we're not trying to learn anything in this conversation anymore, right? There's no learning that's happening in a conversation where somebody says something so blatant like that. It then defaults, at least for me, I make a choice to build a relationship with the person. In that particular case, it was a little bit easier when I was in the Uber with the person who said 87 days because they were driving a car and I didn't want the crazy person who was driving the car to be any more crazy. So it was like, okay, let's not like enrage this person. Let's get on the same. So there was some safety there that helped me in that direction. But in general, in those cases, it's about how well can I allow this person to feel heard in this situation? Can I do a good job at that? And
Absolutely, yeah.
there is and valuing that relationship more than the
Mm-hmm.
facts. So it would be something like so if you said like the world is flat, I'd be responding with like, okay, I'm guessing you probably know there's a bunch of people that don't think the earth is flat. What led you to believe that it is? I'd love to understand how that perspective works. And I would even probably say, like, right now, I kind of think based on the pictures that I've seen that the Earth is round. How does that work for you? How does it work? How would the Earth be flat? Like just pure curiosity, like how do you get to that belief or understanding? Because that's really confusing to me. And that's honest. I didn't have to lie about it. I didn't have to convince him anything. I'm just like, this is the evidence that I've seen. Help me understand that perspective because that's confusing to me.
Mm-hmm.
Because it sounds crazy to
Uh-huh.
me.
I want to mention what Eugene was saying. You're not wrong. Is in that context of the situation with Zelensky, and my friend pointed out that he's a comedian and all that. There is truth behind that. It's just the way it's interpreted to the next to as a supporting point, then to make the oral conclusion. That's the problem, I would say, with that. So I felt that the opening remark by saying you are not wrong gives some validation to some parts of the statements that she made.
Oh, okay. So if you agree with some elements of what she's saying, you could definitely say that. If somebody says the Earth is flat, you
Yeah,
might
that
not
one
say
is
that. Got it. So that kind of a statement would have worked for what she was saying. Like, yeah, those statements are true. Um,
but then how
Anticipation.
to bring it further, because it's like picking points, picking some facts to then come to this weird
Conclusion.
summary. Yeah,
Right.
that's the part where it takes the next
Are I guess the question that I
level
get
of
when I get into
discussion.
that conversation, like sometimes with my buddy at the gym, sometimes I feel like there is a way that we can have a conversation on this and he might hear my perspective. And the other times I was like, I'm not getting through to him on this topic. So then it has more to do with um, just being a friend. I'm not
Oh
going to
yeah.
convince them anything on this topic at all. Like he's got a
Mhm.
view on children that I completely disagree with, which is that he is there to tell them what to do all the time. And I feel like children respond better when they have greater autonomy and they're given choice. It's just
Mhm.
my opinion on the topic, and he is not on board with that. So generally, when he is talking about it, my goal is to get to that's right. I start playing a game with myself. Like when I can get to a point of where I'm acknowledging what he's saying, is like, yeah, you got it. That's what I'm trying to say. That
Yeah.
becomes my goal because at the end of that goal is relationship and rapport.
But,
And
James,
I'm never going to agree with everybody about
what do
stuff.
you think is driving your friend's response?
I have guesses. I mean, but I'm not gonna. I'm not inside of his head, but I have guesses. Mostly, I'm going to assume that it has to do with his personal experience of life up until this point, his experience with his parents, and what he felt like worked for him,
Well,
or what
those
didn't
might be
work
the
for him.
factual thing, but what I was referring to is it seems to me that the response is driven by fear because it is control involved, right?
Right. Yeah.
And your position is give them freedom, let them decide. That's an empowerment position.
Hmm.
So it's a fear versus empowerment or expansion, right? Or
Right.
growth or
Yeah, I
scarcity
agree.
versus abundance. So you cannot win fear with abundance. It's not something that you do. You don't argue about these points. You
Right.
validate, and by doing that, you're giving him control and autonomy. That's what you're doing. You cannot win it by resisting it. You can only acknowledge it and accept it, and that then becomes the position of empowerment.
Right. And I guess the element in that is in the moment. I'm all kind of going back to as a human being, we have a limit on the number of things that we can give attention to in any moment. And when we're in communication or with another person, I feel like I generally have like one thing I can focus on in a conversation, one intention. So sometimes the intention is to communicate, and we're both going to gain some understanding or learning in this thing. And the other one is acknowledgement or the relationship. So I'm choosing either growth or acknowledgement. Those are generally the two intentions. So generally, I like to err on the side of let's grow together, maybe learn some things from each other, and like enter into curiosity. But if that's not possible, let's build rapport and relationship. So I'll start with the one if I feel like I'm getting resistance, like not, I'm just not going to hear any of that, whatever's going on. Then let's lean into the rapport because maybe at some point I feel like rapport is kind of like a bank account, and once that account hits a certain level, like hey, if I'm a millionaire in this guy's rapport account, the stuff that I have maybe carries more weight, or maybe I'm just dumb and I don't know stuff, And like, regardless of the amount of rapport, I'm just going to keep saying dumb things, and they're smarter than I am, and they know what's going on. That's a better way of doing it, and maybe I should be learning from them.
James, I'm interested, if you could, I really would be fabulously intrigued by your ability with your dealing with insulting people when you're in that that higher level. It seems like, and what I think the genius to it, and I think it's absolutely genius, is like you're detached so much from ego, like their comments they just, okay, you're insulting something, but you're not insulting me because I'm over here, I'm up here.
Yeah.
And
I'm consciousness.
Like, oh my
insult
God.
insult consciousness.
Yeah.
You're watching things, you ass.
Can I participate for a bit, please?
Oh,
sure.
We have a person.
Yeah. I've been staying in the background. I cannot speak too much. So hi, I'm Cosmin. So I've been listening to what you have to say, James. And the only thing I can participate with until now is that I've read the book, which also deals about having difficult conversations. And one of the main things that it builds upon is having rapport with the other person. This book is called How to Have Impossible Conversations, a very practical guide, written by Peter Boghossian and James Lindsay, right? And it goes, I'm just plugging this book. that's all that I'm doing, right? But it's around building rapport with the other person and trying to figure out what the other person is thinking about, and just that. The other part I don't know exactly about. I would totally recommend it.
Yeah. I wrote it down. So in that context, Doug, the identity at the core of it, of recognizing our, you know what I think it really came down to is in Eckhart's book, when he was like, what is your next thought going to be? And recognizing, I don't know what my thoughts are. And almost the majority of the time we are reacting with our history. Like, we have a certain life experience that we've gone through, certain things that we've gone through. And as a result of those experiences, we are reacting in the moment based on our history. And if we are doing that and we're not willing to question that reality, if we're like so identified with it, we're not willing to question it, there is a level of simultaneously arrogance and almost terror. Like, I don't want to look at my history at all because what if it's wrong? But arrogance in the sense of like, to believe that our experiences when we were children, because a lot of our ways of thinking about things formed when we were children, what I figured out when I was a kid was actually the reality or the truth of what's happening in this moment right now. Because that's what's happening, right? Like, if we were suddenly to remove your brain from your body, you have no history, no memory of anything that ever happened to you, and you were just conscious presence in this moment, and somebody tried to trigger you, right? There's nothing to trigger because there's no memory, there's no history, there is nothing to trigger.
That's what just blew me away. It was like a flash of inspiration. Now, a Pomeranian still has something to be insulted by, but no, it was wonderful, and I think I might be open to more. But having said that, guys, I do have to run. Thank you for a wonderful day, everyone. I'll talk to you soon. Talk to you soon.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. Yeah, James, when you're describing it, it seems like it was coming straight from Eckhart's mouth, the pain body, right? So
For sure.
What you're identifying with your pain body is the collection of your experiences, your troops, your mistreatings, all this big pot that's boiling. And if someone is kind of adding to it just a little bit, it explodes basically, and all of this coming out. But really, it's just the pain coming out. Even when someone is trying to offend you or someone is trying to trigger you, it says more about them than it says about you. And what they're doing really is just pointing out to the truth of how you are right now. And it's your job to actually take it away and do something with it. It's a learning lesson. Now, you can just turn a blind eye to this, and then it will continuously trigger you throughout your life. Or you can take it as a lesson and try to consciously do something about this response that's happening in your body, because we are multifaceted human beings. There is mind, there is body, there is spirit, there is so many aspects of you. And your subconscious mind is ultimately, much more powerful than your conscious mind. So when you're triggered, now, if you can engage your conscious mind, or at least after the fact, and analyze it and say, oh, there's something something inside of me that wanted to come out. Like what's been holding it down there? Like what is it? Where is it coming from, right? And you start to kind of align yourself, with that part of yourself that's been hurt at some point of life and carrying this pain within you. Once you're able to identify it, and it's going to sound cheesy, but send love to it, like calm it down.
Dude,
and
that is brilliant. And I was about to say something very similar to that. Exactly. You have to do that because that element, whatever that is, that pain body, it generated as a result of suffering and pain that we were having. And the pain body has a purpose. It has an intention. It's there to protect us from suffering, from pain, to lash out, to attack when there is something that could potentially harm us. And what's really going on though is that history, that pain body, it doesn't recognize, it's not presence, right? It is not us, it's not presence. It doesn't really know what's going on. And sending love to it, sending presence to it allows it to be like, hey, I appreciate what you did when I was a kid to protect me from that pain. That's not what's happening right now.
If you guys ever
It's
hear
okay.
about that experiment, there's a guy that has like literally no short-term memory. An interesting case, and they ran an experiment on him. And so they they grabbed a thumbtack and they poked his finger. And he was like, ow, damn, what the? And then, he forgot about it, right? Because he didn't have any short term. So then they were like, hey, can you put your finger here on this finger ID scan? He goes like, oh, no, I can't. I can't, because of XYZ. And he didn't know that it was his body communicating to him that don't give him this finger because pain is going to result. And he was like making up all these crazy excuses like, oh, I can't put this finger there because that's some weird stuff. And so, yeah, like you don't know what the body is communicating to your counterpart, like some from prior pain. That's why I'm so careful on like body touch. How like they tell waitresses, touch the shoulder and you get a bigger tip. And it's like, I don't know if you want to be touching anybody because you don't know what kind of unknown subconscious triggers are in somebody.
Well, it just speaks to how we actually rationalize things. And you just gave this example, like the body remembers. So it evokes the subconscious response, emotional response, chemical response. And then the conscious mind is rationalizing these thoughts, how it feels, even though it doesn't hold the memory, short-term memory of what happened exactly, but it rationalizes why it will not do that. And we do this all the time. Your conscious processes is heavily dependent on how you feel in the moment. What is your chemical balance in this time? What is your emotional dynamic happening? So that's why you're not supposed to make any decision in a bad state of mind. If you're feeling sick, like then you had problems with health, and someone's triggering you tend to react and you tend to rationalize things from the negative standpoint. And just kind of what James gave the analogy is like, if you're feeling just not well, you up to like 30% dumber, or maybe not smarter, 30% not smarter, right? So you cannot make great decisions in the bad states of mind. So in essence, you have to be really careful, to be aware of how you're feeling and what kind of responses, the range of responses that is available to you at any given moment. So before making a good decision, you gotta have to change your state of mind and consider it from another perspective. Only then you'd be able to come to conclusions that are actually driving you and conversation or the environment forward. And it's really difficult. Like we know some people in our social circles then that unable to make good decisions because they're unable to feel good about themselves, about the environment, about the situation. And that's what we're seeing when the response coming from the very negative kind of position continuously on a pretty much like weekly or daily basis. That's actually defined as PTSD, when people are kind of in this states of mind, depressive state of mind, or just feeling bad in general, and because they're not being acknowledged by people around them, this pain wants to come out very swiftly and sometimes abruptly. And that's why it's very hard to be around these people, because they're very toxic. the toxicity within them is just brewing, and they don't know what to do with this. It's not their
Oh,
fault.
damn it! I had an aha moment. I might have been getting insulted and not even been aware of it. Somebody went
Happens a
in
lot.
Somebody went in D once told me, and I don't know what the proper word is, but it was you have like XYZ PTSD. It's a form of PTSD. I don't know, maybe they were just trying to sound smart because they're smart, but I can't remember. But yeah, it's essentially that, like underlying PTSD, and I'm like, I don't really subscribe to that. You know, it's not really your option, is it? It's not really. But yeah, I always wonder, like, do I have it? When does it come out? And how did this person even? What are they even saying that for? I think we all have some kind of PTSD for sure.
Yeah, trauma. I mean, PTSD is just another form of trauma, which
Well, there
is
is
something that our
another-
brain is trying to heal because
You
we went
guys
through something
know-
that was overwhelming.
You guys know PTSD, but have you heard about this term PTSG, I suppose, post-traumatic stress growth?
No,
That's a real thing.
that's like when you're working a job you don't like.
Uh-huh.
So those are experiences where you kind of gone through your PTSD, you healed your pain, and just like we discussed with Jim, you send it love, so you become grateful, and then you draw the experience from it, so it becomes stronger from that experience. You can longer you stop identifying with pain, and you start identifying with sort of gratitude and compassion, you know, of the experience that brings you here to this current moment. So that's a real thing. Actually, look it up. It's scientifically, I think, validated already. Like the whole thing, post-traumatic stress growth.
Hey, Adeline, something I was thinking about. My brain keeps jumping back to that conversation with your friend that you were having. Are you familiar with uh, law? No, not loss aversion. What is the term? Learned helplessness.
Yeah,
Oh,
sure.
yeah.
So, in the
Mhm.
context of what I mean with that is, if in a conversation with a particular friend you are expecting it to become an argument, we create our reality through our expectations. So
Mhm.
if this is the kind of person where you have a kind of a history with that person of like, if we get into this, this is what it's going to turn into, and we start looking for how it's going to become that, we are very good at creating our expectations. So
Interruption,
if
cow. Interruption, cow.
interrupting cow.
Interrupting, cow. I damn it, that hit home. I hate to admit, I think I have that with my best friend. Sometimes I remember one time I was about to call him so I can complain about something, and I don't know how I caught it. I expected sympathy. I expected him to go like, "Yeah, dude, yeah, that sucks, man. They're a jerk," you know, because he will give me a sympathy, and so I'm like, this learned helplessness? Is that what that is?
Um, that isn't specifically learned helplessness. That's just you're having an expectation of how that person is going to be. Learned helplessness is in the scenario that they have. The experiment that was done was they shocked. Actually, you know what? Let me just can I share? Can I share it with you guys real quick? And then it's like I think it's like 30 seconds.
It was in chat.
No, it's
Yeah. They started by shocking the person.
you know about this
And
already. Okay, right.
yeah.
Shocking. It was a dog
But you can
actually.
say the dog. But I think they did it to humans
Oh,
because it was done by Stanford.
they did it to an elephant too, where they tie down a baby elephant with a rope, and then
Yes.
after
Yeah.
it could break at any moment. However, it's learned that it's helpless and it can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
So the difficult
Ah.
element of those things
Ah.
is actually what Dan was talking about is like when we have a habit of a particular kind of helplessness, whatever that looks like,
Yeah.
becoming present in that and or beginning with a new mind, like if this was fresh, if this was a brand new person that you'd never met before, how would you respond to them when they were talking about that? So there's a beginner's mind. I don't know if you're familiar with that term, where we are essentially starting over, like, how would I view this person if we'd never have a conversation before? And I would actually say in a lot of ways it's difficult, because if we have a history, our brain is a very noisy instrument in our conscious awareness, and it's going to remind us of those things.
And on
So
top
the
of
only
that,
thing,
you're probably gunny sacking too. You're probably walking around with this bag of past memories about this person, and you
right?
start talking, and then you're like, well, remember the time you did this? And remember when you did this? And then remember when you did that? And it's like they're hanging out in the past. And yeah, you're trying to be present, trying to have some gratitude, but they're biased. They're so biased.
So the presence is the, I don't know, I really still again love Eckhart. He reframed that as our brain is kind of like a tool that we can use, but oftentimes it uses us when it's loud. And the way in which we can do something about that is growing our consciousness, our presence, to the point of where it's like our brain might be, it's kind of like a TV going on in the background, right? Right now, the TV is so close and it's so loud that it's difficult to not pay attention to what's on that TV. But if we can grow in presence and conscious awareness, the volume level of that TV that is our brain decreases in volume, and it becomes less important. It's noise, but it's not the thing that's important. Eckhart's got a bunch of different ways of suggesting that: body awareness, paying attention to the silence, empty space. If you haven't read The Power of Now, I'd recommend it highly, because presence is a really excellent way of avoiding the whole, like, completely reframing the situation, where it's like the history with the person becomes secondary to presence. I'm going to be present with this person, and through presence, we generally experience love from the other person, because we're listening. When we're present with another human being, we're hearing them. They're feeling heard because we are paying attention to them. We're not lost in thought or imagining where this conversation is going to go. Like, if I'm worried about this is going to turn into an argument, or I'm like, man, this person has talked about all this crap so many times before, I'm sick of this.
No. Elkert, he's the real. I remember before reading his book, I YouTubed him, and there was a guy interviewing him. And I remember, like, 5 minutes into the interview, the interviewer was looking at him all puzzled. And Eckhart Tolle said, yeah, it looked like something's off with you. And he goes, yeah. And he goes, like, let me guess, you're not used to an interviewee asking about you? And he goes, no, this is the first time. And I'm like, yeah, this guy, yeah, he's something else right there, right? He had the space to talk about him and his ideas, and instead he puts the focus on the interviewer.
Yeah, he's picking up on their resistance.
Maybe I want to put it together a little, because so far we have something like a luxury of looking at it from a reflective point of view, and what I would call watching from the balcony. I think you might have heard this, watching from a balcony versus being on the dance floor.
You want to practice?
Not so much about this. So what it means that what we want to get to is, when we are on the dance floor, what do we do about it?
Right.
Yeah.
So Eckhart's book,
that's the part.
That's why I was recommending that, is that he has very practical applications, exactly what to do on the dance floor. The goal is maintaining presence. The more present we are, the less loud the volume of our brain is. So meditation.
Maybe that's part of the preparation. And then, so I'll just equate it to, I'm not trained as a soldier. I think then you have been, you know how it's like, the training. So I'm just supposing what it means. Training people to a physical war takes the training, the skills, and so on. And then even the weapons itself, meaning there are bullets, missiles, nukes, or empty bullets. I mean, there are levels of weaponry, that is for physical war. So when now we relate to what this is, for me, is something that is like a verbal war. Maybe it's too harsh to put it side by side, but give me a chance to mention this. Because what the verbal war is, that these are a bunch of negative words or have negative connotations. It depends, the level of severity it comes back to the person who hears it. Because that's where then the idea of whether it's just an empty bullet, or it's a missile, or it's a nuke, is all in the brain of the other side, who is the listener, who is accepting or hearing this. However, there are some universal things. For example, like autonomy. Why I say this, if let's say in that environment, and coming back to the idea of a learned helplessness, if you have an environment where the autonomy is taken away. So, for example, it starts with, let's say, the supervisor saying things like, you should do this, you should do that, and so on. So it already sets the basic level of freedom and autonomy is taken away. Then from there on, it works up the level of the environment is already, let's say, not ideal. Then they add in the verbal war. The verbal war means, so that's already, let's say, a level of management where it's very hierarchical. And then they throw in the negative or the verbal war. Because let's say if the verbal war is calling names, like saying you're stupid or you are this or that and so on. And putting in that kind of arsenal from a verbal perspective. And that's when it starts to be, I see what you mean about like the recipient of this and taking it in to say whether, well, is this an empty bullet versus a missile or a nuke? And it's all about the person receiving it to then just say it's nothing, let's say. There is no arsenal here.
So it might be helpful to think of presence more of like growth, a capacity versus, so there's I think it's Josh Waitzkin that talks about entity versus growth mindset. So an entity mindset is I am or I'm not, where growth is I can grow into it. So let's say you wanted to run a marathon, right? You're not the kind of person who can run a marathon or can't run a marathon. It's like, okay, I can run this far. And the further the distance, the more we have to be prepared for that situation. Or if we're lifting something that's heavy, right? We can't bench press 200 pounds on our first day. We have to work up to it. So situations like my autonomy has been taken away. That's just added weight on our capacity to be present. It's harder to do it, and therefore we need a stronger sense of presence in order to be able to remain present in those situations and not become flooded. So if there's a situation like I can tell you, like I know where I can't carry it yet when my wife is upset with me about something, and the reality is that she's actually viewing me through the filter of what her father used to do. And as of right now, I am not strong enough presence wise to deal with that. When she does that, I get triggered. I become reactive and unconscious, and I lose my sense of presence. But in a lot of other situations, like if somebody was going to come at me and attack me and just be like, you're such a piece of shit or whatever it is, like nothing's going to happen. The weight of it being personal, someone that I love, someone that I care about, that I'm working very diligently to being the best person for, and failing in that situation is a very hot trigger for me. I can't change her in those situations. That's her history and past. But what I can do is I can grow my state of presence, my state of awareness, so that when she goes into that place, I can remain present with her. And that growth of presence is something that I'm still practicing. And when I get to a point of where there occasionally, I'd say like maybe 5% of the time when she responds to me with a pattern from her past with her father, I can be present enough to be like, hey, Bunny, I love you. And it seems like it seems like I'm doing this right now. And maintaining that presence so that I can maintain empathy in that situation. But it's only a small percentage of the time right now. My intention is to grow my presence, and it's gotten better. Like I respond. I should probably be more like 10% of the time. At the beginning of our marriage, I never did it. There wasn't one time out of 100 that I would respond in an empathetic way when she was doing that. I do it much more now, and that has to do with just growth. And that if I'm not doing it right now, there's a saying based on results. If the result is I am not responding with presence or compassion or empathy in this moment, it's because I am not strong enough personally yet to be able to deal with this level of weight. And I just need to continue growing. And that growth mentality allows me to get back to work, to take responsibility for it, and to do something about it. Because otherwise, I'm in a learned helpless place where it's like, I can't do anything. This is going to suck forever. This situation is always going to be bad. And we have no choice anymore. We've removed our sense of choice in that moment. And we are drifting into more of a blame scenario where this is now the other person's fault, which is easy to do, because like it seems like they have more control. But in doing that, we are giving up our autonomy and our choice. When there are choices, there are things that we can do. We just may not be aware of what those choices are, of what we could do. Sorry, there's a lot of words there.
So Adeline, what was your question, I suppose? Was there a question there, or it was you sharing your experience?
I'm taking all this in to try to connect where a lot of the discussions we're having is more from watching from the balcony, as I call it. Actually, it's not me coined this, it's Heifetz. He's like a Harvard Kennedy School leadership expert and he talks about this point about leadership on the line, where we acquire skills and reflections, but we're watching from the balcony, and we're needing to prepare to be on the dance floor. And when it's execution time, when it's on the dance floor, for sure I'm feeling there.
Okay.
So I hear that the whole idea is to have presence. For sure. I mean, that's why I equate it to the whole idea of a soldier going into a war. They have to be trained in so many levels, right? The mental state, and not only that, but the skills of the fight. And so.
And
yeah.
the thing is, Adeline, I mean, there is only two things you can do really, is how you prepare and how you respond.
Can't control how you respond most of the time.
So
in the moment, it's too late.
How you prepare, if you're going into a conversation, if you're going to into a war, how do you prepare? For example, just as analogy, that you cannot run too fast and you have to run fast during war. So how would you prepare? By sprinting, right? But you also have to realize that when we just give an analogy of the war physical body, we have multiple bodies. We have emotional body, we have mental body, and we have physical body. So right now we're just talking about mental body. Like, these are the thoughts, these are the experiences, like these are thoughts, ideas. And what you're doing, you're getting another perspective. And that hopefully changes the situation of how you look at the same thing, whether you're looking at the battle from this side or from that side. You're still looking at battle. Well, how do you prepare emotionally for the conversation or for the battle or for whatnot? Emotional is basically how you're driving the energy in your body, right? What are you going to allocate your energy, in a certain, part of the battle, shall we say, since you're using this analogy. So for that, there is a specific process that actually helps you regulate your emotional drivers. And I've been talking about this for second year, really. And, it's hard to kind of see the measurable results because you're talking about something emotional, right? Emotion, the energy. And, I showed, I think, you multiple times. I'm not sure if you've seen the EFT, or which stands for emotional technique. This is not a technique just to, feel better. It is actual working with your nervous system. It's a scientifically related process. So how do you regulate your nervous system? How do you, prepare your nervous system for whatever's going to happen in front of you? And it's relatively—
I'm familiar with that, actually. Eugene, I was in your meetings as well.
Yeah, and it's counterintuitive because you're saying that you're looking at it from the balcony, but you're feeling it inside right now. You're talking about your friend and you're feeling it. Like you're feeling the intensity, and that you can measure. Now, if you objectively measure it from the scale from 0 to 10, now you have something tangible. Now you have something to measure. Now you have something to fall back to. Now, you're talking about perspective. Perspectives are great. It might give you like, okay, now I can look at it from this standpoint. But we're talking about the emotional triggers. The friends, the reason why they emotionally trigger you, because you call someone a friend. A friend is a collection of experiences and biases there and values that you attach to that person. And when it's filters, through wrong ways, it triggers you. So that's wrong. That's not how it's supposed to be. That's not how you're supposed to react. So with EFT, what you can do is, in terms of nervous system balance, once
Sorry,
you
Eugene,
realize,
I don't want to interrupt you, but I didn't understand that. When you said that's wrong, what I didn't understand what you were saying.
I'm talking about biases, right? So you know that your friends have certain biases towards certain things. So when they coming and talking to you that falls outside of these biases, your subconscious mind triggers you like something is wrong here. Look out! There is some danger lurking here. There is something unfamiliar happening here, and you could respond by fight or flight response, which is stress, which is fear, or you can become curious, which you demonstrated before, like, yeah, what is it all about, right? So there's really like simplistically two ways to responding to everything. It's a fear or love. That's it. So what you're doing really with those practices, Adeline, not to dive and look at it from the balcony standpoint, you actually feel it true. You use your mind to bring you back to this memory of your friend or of your colleague or whoever you're talking about. You elicit this emotional response, you measure it objectively, because now it becomes something tangible. And then you work with your nervous system to release the tension that you feel. Now, what happens then is something magical, because you don't really do this like daily. It's not something that you practice. But when you start practicing it, you will start noticing that actually you bring tremendous amount of emotional baggage to the dynamic between your colleagues, between your friends, that you're not even aware of, because that's just not coming to your conscious processes. And that comes back to you, James, when you're speaking with your wife, for example. There are some things that you do, the way you act, that triggers your wife and triggers that response. There's some part of you that fuels that response that you're getting from the environment. So when you start regulating your nervous system, when you start addressing the stressors, triggers, stressors is the same thing. When at the point when it's no longer a factor, again, by measuring it, if it's become from 0 to 10, let's say 6, 7, 8, you work through with your nervous system, you dismantle it, becomes 0. So what happens actually, you cannot even say that it's stressful no more, because in order to measure the stress levels, you have to kind of have a reference point. So the weird thing about EFT and working with your nervous system is actually you removing this reference point altogether. What happens is that your memories start to kind of mislead you, because what you remember is tightly associated with the emotional snapshot or signature that you had at that moment. It's like a jolt of electricity that comes through your body, and you're like, okay, that's fear, that's discomfort, that's stress, that's judgment coming at me, right? It's a jolt of electricity, chemical balance, working in a certain way, and that's what forms a memory. Now, what you're doing with EFT or nervous system balancing, like you're removing the subtext of memory, you're removing the emotional dynamic, you're changing the chemical balance within your body. Now you're changing it so that instead of stress, something else enters into this dynamic. You might not recognize it immediately. Later on, you might say, well, that was compassion. But compassion is just a compressed word. It's like it doesn't say anything. Like when I say compassion, James, it might be one thing for you, might be a completely different thing for Adeline. For me, I might be feeling it 100%. For you, you might be feeling it at 10%. It doesn't say anything, about how you actually, what you put under the word compassion. So what I'm driving at is once you start dismantling these processes within yourself and start having more emotional flexibility, that's when sort of a sense of control comes into your own internal processes. That's what I mean by how do you prepare for negotiation? How do you prepare for the conversation or for anything out there? Now, if you know that there are certain triggers within you, these unconscious buttons that are being pushed from the other side, from the environment, and you're able to take conscious control of it, prepare for negotiation, then how you respond in the negotiation will be completely different. You'll be surprised. And you will realize that you're surprised because your memory of how you respond to certain situations will change. And there would be different response coming at you from the other side. It would actually feel sometimes even magical. Your wife, for example, your colleague will start behaving differently. It's like there is just environment changes around you because your perspective changed, your energy changed, how you rationalize certain problems, how you rationalize stressors changes too. And therefore your response changes and the whole world around you changes. Because you don't see, just so I finish it, you don't see the world as it is, you see the world as you are.
Right.
So what are you doing?
That's what everybody does.
The way you are.
Manifestation.
And that's, you know, the law of attraction, manifestation, this woo-woo thing, and it becomes woo-woo because it's only at the conceptual level. It's a conceptual idea, but it's actually true because you can rewire yourself, you can change your perspective, you can change your chemical balance and how you respond to certain things out there, and the world around you changes too.
Eugene, so for me, what you have said here sounds doable. I'm not saying it isn't, but sounds doable. Seems pretty complicated and highly, I mean, you need to put a lot of work in it in order to make it work. And it seems that it isn't something that you can, achieve relatively easily.
Well, nothing worth achieving is ever easy.
Well, easy and hard is a relative term, and you have to define.
Yes. Okay. From my point of view, personally, I would think that it is a complicated process.
No, it's there's a shortcut to it. I'll tell you what did it for me one time. It was Eugene does that EFT tap. You ever seen when they go like this? I had to go into the office and I was dreading it, like, and I want to say I'm a decent negotiator. I have no fear, you know. I got my peace. But in this case, I was so tense, so nervous to go in there. And I was in my car and I'm like, I'm just gonna drive home. I'm gonna go like do something else. And then I just started going this, breathing, and then just like went away. And I'm like, yeah, I'm getting in my own way here. What am I doing? And I just went in there and handled it. No, there's definitely shortcuts out there. That for me is my biggest shortcut. Just hit that meridian point.
Just to speak to the point, guys, and Cosmin, again, to your point, difficult or easy is relative term. It's just something that you don't do right now. Like you don't do it at all. None of you do. Because what I'm talking about here is actual practice, like going to the gym. Like you don't talk about gym, you go to the gym and you practice it. So, I provide on my training sessions a specific set of tools on how to practice those things. So you get better and better. It's just never ending improvement, just like this gym. There is always potential for improvement. And I'm talking about your nervous system, which is a big part of being you, right? It's just something that, Western medicine slowly start recognizing. And, Western medicine doesn't treat it. We just, feed you pills, and there you go there. But actually, there is much deeper, understanding and underlying knowledge in that. Somehow Chinese figured it out that, about 4,000 years ago, if you stick needles in your face around your body, you can influence the energy, right?
You got to know where to put them though, right? You just don't jab them in there.
You just jab it in there and it works, right? So you don't have to jab your face, but you can actually stimulate the nervous system endpoints and release tension from the nervous system. What happens is that you start noticing certain shifts within your body and it becomes tangible. It becomes something you experience.
Yeah, actually, just from those few taps I did, I feel much lighter now. Believe it or not.
That's interesting, Eugene, by the way, that you just hit a trigger for me when you said none of us do that.
Well, that's true. It's just
well, you don't know that I do.
Maybe you do, maybe you don't. I'm talking in general terms. It's just not something that people practice consciously. It might be used.
Let me ask you a question. When we are talking with people, should we talk in general terms or should we care about the people in front of us?
Well, okay. We can go that far. What I'm saying really is, what is it? Majority of people, when we're talking about this specific tools, it's referred as meditation.
Yeah.
And when you're
there's
talking
lots of different forms of that.
Yeah, and of course I'm assuming, and I'm, sticking ideas and words in your mouth right now, which is, might be a little bit.
That's definitely a trigger. Definitely have a trigger around people putting like words in my mouth that I'm not saying or that I'm not doing. So mostly I was verbalizing it out loud because I don't like having triggers, and I find if I verbalize them, now I've given you a weapon over me that I can now grow in. This is a way to trigger me. Put words in my mouth. I'm telling you so that next time we are in a situation where you get an opportunity to do that, you already know what it is.
But
That way I
James thinking.
So Adeline, I'm curious about the dance floor analogy and the balcony analogy. Is that kind of like I'm wondering if this is the same thing where when we're brainstorming, we're talking about stuff that's kind of like the balcony view, where preparing for the dance floor feels like more of a valuable use of time. Like, okay, what do we actually need to get done to be ready to be on the dance floor versus talking about the people that are on it? Is that trying to understand what the distinction is between being in the balcony and it sounds like there's a being on the dance floor and then preparing to be on the dance floor.
It's like a mock negotiation observation and then getting into it. No, I seen that happen in mocks where like with
Is it
the
okay
A.
if Adeline answers that?
Oh yeah.
I don't know if I can do justice to it, but actually this comes from Ron Heifert.
Ron who?
Ronald Heifert. Let me write that down. He's a HKS Harvard Kennedy School professor in terms of especially on leadership. So it's been around like 4 years, I don't know, 20 years. And so because he's actually he has a very interesting background. I mean, he's like a world-class musician. His father is a very well-known cardiologist. He himself is a medical doctor and so on and so on. But he decided that the way to make an impact is really about the emotional side, or if you can say about leadership. And so actually, you know, how HKS is where all these politicians go to school. To get ideas, I guess. And he's very highly sought after. So he has this idea, it's called Leadership on the Line. And basically they are learning about leadership skills, right? And so, but at the same time, he puts a differentiation or distinction about learning how to be a leader, etc., and basically being on this dance floor. And I think if we can look at Zelensky, he's on the dance floor.
Okay.
Learning by fire, right? He's right there, just performing.
Got it. So being on the dance floor then versus, well, it seems like at some level then what we're doing here is not being on the dance floor. Like we're not actually.
Talks about that.
Right.
He talks about that it's necessary to rotate. No.
Right. So preparing to be on the dance floor is kind of what the intention of like this community is about.
And going into it, performing it, practicing it, I mean, applying, actually doing it, the actual negotiations, for example. And then it's also good to take a step back. So not all the time be on the dance floor because you would just exhaust yourself. So, you know, he sees this analogy of dancing. It's a very well-suited analogy for life in general.
Okay. So in the context of that, like, kind of like we're practicing to be on the dance floor with what we're doing now, that with conversations like that, where we're having conversations with people who can trigger us that we maybe have a history with, and if we're preparing to enter into those conversations well, preparing to be on the dance floor would be how we're practicing. Is that like how we're practicing to be on the dance floor? Or I feel like there's a piece in there that I'm not clear on how you're like what is that exactly? Like when you're preparing to be on the dance floor, what exactly does that I feel some like an expectation in there.
Okay, so you know, actually the whole thing is part of a framework. It's called adaptive leadership. And
objective leadership?
Adaptive, like being
adaptive.
Adaptable.
Okay, adaptive leadership.
And so
okay.
Maybe I just Google it to find like a simple one. And so I saw this one with this diagram that says, so he talks about the virtues of, you know, embracing uncertainty or embracing failure, all those things. But just talking about being on the dance floor is about sometimes people are just doing and not taking a step back to reflect, and actually doing the opposite also is extreme, right? So being conscious about this, that at some point you need to go and perform. So that there are balances to be made about some people are just doing the job and
Being on the
not
dance
taking
floor.
the time. Yeah, not
To
to
get
taking
off
the
the dance
time
floor.
to reflect.
Reflect.
Yeah, reflect. Yeah.
Mm,
So
okay,
there are
I
all
get
these
it.
benefits of both ways. Not doing
Well-
too much on one versus the other, because if you're observing, you're perceiving, you're intervening, like what we're doing with these mock negotiations when we are listening to two parties doing a mock, then we are observing.
Mhm.
So
Right.
so
So
we're on
that's
the
a,
balcony basically. Yeah.
oh, so getting into the balcony is a good thing and reflecting
Yeah.
in that.
Sure.
Oh, I see. Okay. Initially, when you
Yeah.
were communicating that, I was under the understanding that being in the balcony was like where we're spending all of our time and we shouldn't be there. We need to be on the dance floor. But this is more along the lines of people are so busy being on the dance floor, they're not getting off and reflecting on how well they danced. Like if we were going to be in that analogy, if there were cameras videotaping us dancing and then we stopped dancing, we went and looked at our how we did and been like, okay, how are
Right.
we doing? And then getting feedback from the other people on how we
Yeah.
did. So I feel like
Yeah.
that the method by which we do that, by
Mhm.
how we're doing getting off the dance floor, is it's really important because there's lots, like if we're looking internally and being like, no, I did a great job, because we're looking from our own perspective and our own
Mhm.
filters or our own history and being like, we did great. I did great. But then if from other people's perspectives, they'd be like, nah, you could definitely be doing better. I have a buddy of mine. He is very dedicated individual. He makes movies. He's on like number 12 now, but they're terrible. I love him to death, but he makes awful movies. And the first one that we did our theater together, and he showed it in the theater, went and watched it, and he said, so what do you think? And I was like, the visuals were interesting, but dude, the storyline and the dialogue was awful, and he blew up on me. Like, being honest, he was just like, why the hell would you say this? I put all this time and energy and effort into it. Why can't you just be encouraging? And I'm like, got it. Okay, doesn't want any of that kind of feedback. Understood. So how I think
Exactly.
being in a space where it's safe to get that feedback, and also being willing to be humble, being willing to be wrong, and is a really
Yeah.
important thing. And I think having a community or a culture that allows that to be safe to do that. Pixar is actually known for this, the animation company. One of the reasons why they did so well is they do these meetings, these dailies, where somebody will make it like a
Scrum?
piece of the film, and they'll go in, watch it all, and everybody just gives super candid feedback around what they thought was good and what they didn't think was good. And I mean, they brought that over to Disney, and right after they brought that over to Disney, then all of a sudden Disney Animation made Frozen, and it just keeps expanding. Like they're using that methodology of having that, getting off the dance floor and how that action is done. I don't know. Personally, I think it's really important how that's done. The environment needs to be safe. We need to be able to be direct and honest about stuff, and people need to be able to feel like they can, so that we can grow, and that's okay. We can be vulnerable. We can be wrong, and I'm happy to
Yeah.
learn from everybody in the situation or in the space. So I guess I'd be curious from your perspective how the dance floor, getting off the dance floor, because it sounds like you have a way that you're thinking that could work well.
I think it's by the way, you heard about, I don't know who it was that says that negotiation is not a spectator sport.
Mhm.
So I think it's going towards the same kind of idea about that we practice and then we use this to have the actual execution of it in these negotiations. Then at the same time, we go back to the practice. So it's doing both, and that's where we get better at
Got it.
anything. So
Eugene looks like he's having some thoughts too around how. How do you think we do that, Eugene? The getting off the dance floor and reflecting. What do you feel like are the best ways to do that?
Getting off the dance floor.
Eugene, that happened with that nurse earlier, where she was doing the tools, and then she got to see Eli go, and she's like, "Oh, he's doing the same thing I did. Oh, that makes more sense now."
Yeah, that was interesting. That was very interesting to observe. Yeah, I kind of missed the context of the dance floor. So if you can rehash me, then
yeah. Well, initially, it sounded like Adeline was saying that being in the balcony was kind of like a bad spot. That's how I was hearing it anyway. And that when we're actually in the thick of it, we're actually doing the negotiation. That's the dance floor itself. And this, what's his name, Ron, suggested, hey, get off the dance floor and reflect so that you can get better at it. Like you need to get off the dance floor. You need to get out of the thick of it, which I kind of feel like is the intention of this group or the community in general is we're getting off the dance floor and we're practicing the skill and we're reflecting on it. So if, you seem to be contemplating about something. I was thinking that you were contemplating what we were talking about. What were you? What was on your mind, Eugene? You were having your thinking face on.
Oh man, it's 12:30 in the night.
Oh, right. It's late for
face
you.
is melting. I'm so surprised that I was able to squeeze the juice out of my mental capacities and deliver some sort of a message to you guys.
That was good.
No, I mean, like pulling out of the dance floor really it's taking a deeper breath, like just some sort of a physical anchor really helps. And just kind of you have to pull out and understanding where is it leading to, like where is it leading to, like where the energy is aligned here. If it's not aligned towards something productive, then it's only going to go downhill. If it goes downhill, why are you there? What's the point? But you cannot do that because when you're in the thick of it, you don't have enough mental real estate to do that. You don't have enough space. That's why it's important.
Whenever you say something I find really intriguing, I have to ask, when you say the energies align, how do you do that? How do you know if the energies are aligning?
Well, you know how we're saying like, oh, you bring an emotional baggage to the table, and
right.
Sometimes you get triggered, or sometimes you're just putting this emotional baggage on someone else and it just stinks. Well, you always do that in a sense. Like if you're really, unless you're really careful, unless you're really conscious of what you're doing and how you're communicating, you're always giving off the vibe, right? So what is the vibe that you're giving off in any given moment? What is the energy that's kind of present at the table? And what are you actually, how are you contributing to this? I mean, again, this is all like rationalization and this is like high overview, high level view of everything. But, pulling out of it is actually disconnecting from this energy, disconnecting from the moment, and, some sort of a reframe and pattern interrupt. That's basically what it is. That's the essence of it. So you have to interrupt yourself first, pull out. And then if the other person is still engaged in something not productive, it's up to you whether you're going to engage them in a pattern interrupt or try to redirect the conversation to something else. Just like you ask Adeline these questions during the bulletproof session, you just ask kind of a relevant question, and it changed the dynamic for a second.
I call that a reframe.
That's an ego trip.
Ego trip.
Yeah.
So in essence, you're gonna have to interrupt yourself first, and you cannot do that if you're in the thick of it, or if you haven't practiced it, or if you don't have any sort of anchor to pull you back, like a hard stop.
Right, which is why you value the EFT, because you feel like that's a good solid anchor to pull you back.
EFT, this is just a technique. You have to understand what it does, really. And
yeah, most all of it's just a sense of presence. When you're tapping on your meridians, your attention immediately goes into your body, and when your presence is in your body, your awareness is in your body, you become present instantly. So
state of presence is a chemical balance too. Like it's a specific blend of chemicals in your body that allows you to become more or less present.
I would say we definitely are going to disagree on that point, sir.
Okay. How so?
There is, I think, a prevailing thought that there's two different ideas around this. One is that we are the chemical processes that are happening in our brain. And then there's another one, which is my brain is kind of like a tool, and I have a soul and a presence that is beyond my mind.
These are just words, James.
What's that?
These are literally just words. Like you're just giving ideas upon ideas. It's a mental construct.
Well, in any context, the only way in which I can communicate them is with words, since I can't, mind meld with you. If I could do that, I could do a mind meld on you. I could just give those thoughts to you. But since all we got is words and tone of voice and body language, that's all I got. So how would you go about expressing the soul or consciousness to another person? Because that's essentially where I feel like that idea of the chemical balance feels like, at least to me, that That's more on the I'm a brain, and not I am a soul with a brain.
So first of all, like if you look in just at the fundamentals, like chemicals itself, right? The chemical balance. And if you look at the cells, like we are a collection of 13 something trillion of cells organized in the communities that are living, dying, thriving, surviving, doing their own thing. And what we call our mind is just a small subset of this neurons or chemicals, bouncing between each other. And that's what we call like existence, basically.
Got it. So it
So
sounds like you're saying that there isn't a soul, or there isn't presence. I view
Well-
kind of presence and soul as the same thing.
it's hard to agree or disagree on those points unless we define what soul is.
Right. Okay. Consciousness or presence. It's a watching of what's happening. So we can watch the chemical processes in our brain in the version of when we're having an emotional experience, or where our mind is having thoughts around something. We can watch those things, but we aren't those things. So a soul, at least in the terminology that I'm using it, is that which is aware of thoughts or feelings. And generally most of our interactions with the world, like when I'm looking at you and I'm experiencing empathy, I've got mirror neurons in my brain that are mirroring your facial expressions, your body language. And as a result, my mind and body is making a representation emotionally of that in myself, so I can get a gauge on where you're feeling about something. But at the end of all of that, it's me. I am watching that experience in my mind. And as a result of that, there is, I wouldn't even say I am actually understanding anything. If anything is being understood, my brain might be having an understanding, and I'm just watching that understanding. So I'm the person that's watching the TV, and the TV is not me. So the soul would be that which is watching the TV. That's how I define that.
So the way I'm thinking about consciousness is like you're in the ocean, right? And you're like a container in the ocean, in the water.
I'm a container in the ocean.
Like a bottle, like a transparent bottle that's floating in the water.
Okay.
And waves, sometimes they bring you out of the water to the surface level, and then they drag you down. So the spurs of the moment that this bottle consciousness or soul kind of propelled out of the water, it's able to distinguish that it's not in the water anymore, that there's something else, different environment, different vibration, so different density. Like the ocean itself and water is one density, then you come out of this and there's air and a different space, that's the other. So the contrast itself,
is that the bottle? Is consciousness the bottle?
Yeah, the bottle itself, because like the container, the body is a container. That's what I'm referring to as the as bottle, just analogy, right? So
analogies are good. I like analogies.
So once this bottle is kind of a little bit out of the water and able to experience different environment, it says it's not that environment anymore.
Right.
So playing this contrast game, and eventually it's going up, and then it goes back to the depth of the water. But it collects this reference experience. It has some sort of an imprint on this container. When you move between these different frequencies, it changes you in a sense.
What's in the ocean in this analogy? What is the ocean like the world? Like our experience of the world?
It's an environment.
It's the environment. Okay. And the bottle itself is consciousness?
Consciousness is, yeah, that's an interesting question. Thank you for asking this. This is a fascinating conversation. I think of it this way. Consciousness is that perceives the differences between different environments.
Okay. So the way I perceive consciousness is less of what it is than it's more of like empty space. It's actually Eckhart, I got this idea from Eckhart, that empty space is what allows things to exist. If there was no empty space, there would be no existence. If there was no silence, there could be no words, because we wouldn't be able to distinguish them. So the thing that's really valuable are not the objects necessarily in the space, but the space itself, the emptiness itself. And for me, Right. Well, not the environment. I guess it could be considered the environment. I feel like the environment, at least for me, that term is the things that are in the space creates the environment, whereas the space itself is nothing. Like nothingness is what, like
That's fundamentally, I think that's not the way we're
well,
looking at
what
it.
I'm saying is like environment, at least the way that I define it, like the environment that I'm in right now is my office. It has walls, it has ceilings, it has a floor. There are
That's one part of the environment. There is also environment under your skin and that surrounds your skin. There is also environment in your head. There's a
so
different.
so I guess there's a distinction between environment and space. So space creates the allowance of an environment. Without space, there can be no environment.
You see, space. The word space is a container in itself.
What?
You
No,
say-
a container has limits. Space has no limits. You can put a container in a space. You can't put space into a container. The space already exists inside of the container and outside of the container. So, like,
we're talking about the same thing or similar things. What
Yeah.
I was referring to as environment, like space is an environment too, like from the standpoint of, you know, how do you observe this environment? Even if you go to the cosmos around, there is still frequencies going on, there is still vibrations going on, and that's a different environment.
let's go at this place because I feel like our definition of one thing is where we're struggling. Let's say, like theoretically speaking, all matter and energy is removed from the universe. What is left?
You know, that's
How would you define that?
You cannot define that doesn't exist.
Well, right. We can't. Well, I guess. Well, we can't define it completely, obviously, because you can't do that. I mean, like Eckhart says, I guess what words will you use to? Because when I'm talking about that, like I'm saying it, and you're recognizing a reality that I'm pointing to, right? We could say nothing. Nothing is a word that defines that. Empty space is.
Nothing.
So I guess
the whole word. The whole
what's
word
that?
says no thing, nothing.
Right. So is that how you would define an empty space? I guess that's the question is like Eckhart, at least when I was reading The Power of Now, he defines empty space as that which has the greatest value because it cannot be destroyed. And it allows everything else to be. It allows the existence of things. Because without that empty space,
yeah, 100%,
the unmanifested, as he describes it.
Any words, like if you're looking from the very deep, like spiritual kind of standpoint, any word is just a signpost. It's showing you something. It's
exactly. So I'm looking for your signposts about empty space and absence, nothing. How do you, when you're describing emptiness, like in my room, I couldn't walk around my room if it was completely filled with stuff. So the space allows me to move through it. There's obviously oxygen or air in the space, but the emptiness allows for movement, right? So I guess how do you define emptiness or space? Like if you're talking about that, I feel like there's some resistance around having any vocabulary or words around that at all. Mostly I'm just trying to connect to understand how you use that, because I feel like if I understand what that is, then when we're talking about environment, I feel like there's a distinction between an environment and empty space or a void. And I'm just curious, for the empty space or void, what do you call that?
Yeah, I think James, space is a property of environment.
Okay, space. So how would you define emptiness, or the thing that I'm trying, like that reality, the signpost? Like my signposts are void, empty space. Like if all energy and matter was removed from the universe, the thing that would be left over would be empty space. How would you define that? Because I feel like once I understand what that vocabulary is, then my understanding of what environment is for you is going to make a lot more sense. I feel like there's a resistance to just having a description around, if we removed all matter from the universe, matter and energy from the universe, what would you call what's left? How would you describe that?
I'm describing it right now by dynamic silence, James. This cannot be named, really. How do you label something that cannot be labeled? I mean, we started this discussion of what consciousness really is. And for me, the way I understand it right now, at this point of time, it is a contrast between different environments.
So
Uh,
you're going back to it though. I still can't understand that until I understand what that void is for you, because it feels like there's like I'm sensing some really strong resistance to describing that. Because you're right, it's signposts,
I don't
right?
know how to describe, James. I don't think there is a resistance per se, and I think I understand what you're pointing at, but this is the thing that can be pointing. Have you heard this joke? When the first astronauts went to space
Mhm.
and came back, they've been interviewers were asking, well, are you okay?
I'm just having I did something dumb. Never mind.
So when the first astronauts came from space, they've been asked like, oh, but you've been out there in outer space. Have you seen the God? And the reply was, yes. And she is black.
um, if I think mostly what I'm in that the void or the essence that I'm talking about, that for me is consciousness. That thing that defies description, that is conscious awareness for me. That is the soul. It's something that is so we don't have words to describe it, and the best we can do is point a sign at the void, the empty space that would exist if everything was removed, and that is the universe, and I am that, or I'm a piece of that, and within that idea of a void or empty space, that is anything that goes into there is what I am experiencing. So when my brain is making noise or I'm having an emotional experience about what's going on, I am literally the empty space that's experiencing those things happening. None of those things are me. So the reason why I was asking about that is I feel like the environment a lot of times, at least internally, is more of environment is like my mindset. That's another word that I would use for my internal environment that I'm having. My mindset of how I think about people, how I think about the world, how I think about myself, how my body is currently feeling, the emotions that I'm currently experiencing, the thoughts and ideas that are going through my head. All of those are part of the environment that is happening inside of myself, inside of that void or that empty space. So that's why I was curious what you call that, because mostly if I was like, okay, this is the void or the empty space, and that's how I define the soul or presence in some ways, I was like recognizing that I am that void and that I don't know what you call that. So
So let me make an
okay.
interesting distinction here, because I love where it's going. I'm posing these questions. I know I had the chance to kind of dabble into this, so I'm picking my own brain. I think what soul is. So soul has properties, and it changes. So soul has property like mind is a property of soul, body is a property of soul, energy
Mind is
is
a property of soul.
Yes.
Okay, I think we might be using different words for what that means then.
Well,
It's okay. Sorry, keep going. I just wanted to make sure that I was hearing you correctly, because I feel like a lot of times when we're having conversations, we might be using signposts to point at different elements of reality, but we're using the same word.
Well,
And
definitely.
the conversation is about what is that signpost pointing at for you? Because I think mine's pointing in a different direction.
Well, you know how they say there is mind, body, and spirit. I'm not sure that spirit equals soul. I think spirit is closer to energy, like what we probably now referring to energy. So there is mind, body, and energy, and mind, body, and energy is a property of soul. Now, when soul exits the environment, in this environment, the property of soul could be, James, something that mind that identifies as James, body that's a container for James, and energy that fuels the relationship between body and mind. And these are the properties of soul. So when the time of the container is finished, the time of body is finished, that's what we call death. But also there could be the energy just finished in the body. It doesn't fuel anymore the mind and body connection, right? And again, that's when you die, or the mind dies and the person just becomes a vegetable person, basically. So this is sort of a container or different properties of soul. So soul is or soul, or maybe even consciousness in this case. Maybe consciousness and soul something close.
You know what I think it is these three words are synonymous for me: soul, spirit, consciousness. Those are all they're all pointing at the same. All three of those signposts are pointing at the same reality for me. So it sounds like your signposts those words for you are pointing at a different reality. Just so you know, whenever I'm saying things like that, I don't feel like I have sole ownership over the meaning of words. If that makes sense, it's like these are the weird signposts that I picked up somewhere along the way in my history that says this is pointing at this element or aspect of reality. I have very little attachment to my words. They can mean anything. Mostly what's important is in our conversation, are we communicating about the same reality? So I want to know what your signposts are pointing at. So
Well,
in that,
reality is defined by your personality.
no, okay. Then again,
Reality,
we're
so
using
what I'm
different words
saying
for
is
reality then.
Personality, personal reality. That's what defines the reality, really.
That's
But
clever, but word usage. But I have reality there. Well, actually, what are your thoughts on an ultimate reality? Like, oh, actually, no. What probably would make this feels like more of a faith conversation. What are your thoughts on God as the creator of the universe? I think at the core of all of this is probably like an idea or beliefs around the values. And like I said, I have atheist friends as well. So I can have very different perspectives on whatever is happening. But I feel like at the core of all of this, I'm guessing that your belief in a creator of the universe is something that you don't really jive with. Like that's like, nah, we make that up.
this again, this is you could look at it from very surface level, or you could go very, very deep, and not everyone would be able to look deep depending on the level of conceptualizations, the level of education that we're talking about. When you say God created universe, it's just ridden with biases, it's just ridden with preconceived notions and how you understand God and what's universe and what does it even mean to create something. What is it created something? Is it created out of nothing? Like there's just so many.
Oh yeah, there's a lot to unpack with that. At some level,
That's
it's kind of
fascinating.
like, do I?
Hey, hold on, James. Do you
Right.
believe in Jesus Christ?
Yes.
Okay,
Well,
okay.
I say yes, but again, like what you just said, there are words in that, and each one of those words can have so many different meanings. Because
Okay,
I've had conversations
just
about.
briefly, James. I know you can speak volumes about it, but really briefly, like synopsis. What is Jesus Christ to you?
Well,
Like when
firstly, I feel like the
yeah.
word Christ has an individual meaning versus Jesus. Like the whole Jesus was a man, and Christ is the son of the creator of the universe. Well, the brief Christian version of that. Um, Mary had a son. He was the son of God, immaculate conception. He sacrificed himself, on a cross. And if we accept that as a gift, we are granted eternal life in heaven. I think it's way more complicated than that, but that's kind of like the general overall like Christianese
That's
version
the
of what that.
interpretation of certain events
Mhm.
that potentially happened or not happened. That's supposed to describe a deeper meaning or truth of how. What is it that we're living in? Like, what is this universe? What is this place? What is this
Right.
container that we kind of find ourselves, and how do we make sense of it?
Mhm.
From my standpoint, I'm not a religious person. I'm deeply religious person, but I'm not in a sense
Spiritual.
like.
What's the difference between? Yeah, I was about to ask that. What's the difference in spiritual and religious for you?
Yeah, so when you talk about religion, I think this is close to what you're describing right now. It's a specific dogmatic view on certain events and how it being interpreted from certain position. They all point to kind of similar truth. All religions point to similar truth, but a lot of them are biased towards certain things. And if you're kind of going against those biases, people meet it with resistance, and resistance introduces very kind of downward spiral that goes opposite to understanding, opposite of deeper truth.
Mm.
And what I'm referring to is, a spirituality is that, again, it's all pointing to the same thing. It's all pointing to perhaps what we're calling a soul or consciousness, but this cannot be named. It cannot be described, because
Why not?
the word itself is a container. You cannot describe, as something bigger by using container. It's just literally some vernacular. It's a point of view, that pointing to
Um,
the.
the subjective versus the objective. Have we talked about that kind of like that defining line of like objective is that which can be explained through discourse, and subjective is that can only be connected with based on our own personal experiences. So like I could teach you math, but I can't teach you what it feels like to fall in love. Like you're not going to experience falling in love by me talking about it. And that there is some reality or some elements of what we can experience as humans that we can only ever understand or experience. And there are some things that are even beyond that. There are things that we can't even experience. There's like truth beyond even what we can personally experience. So that there's like a scale. And if we are trying to objectify that which is either subjective or even beyond subjective, that we are doing a disservice to it in some ways, and we are making it smaller than it is. And it almost feels like, from what I can tell, like there's a resistance that you're having. It's like, let's not put a label on like even the idea of things like God or something that's so big that we can't personally experience. And this is an objective. Why would we even use a word to describe this? Because it's going to do it a disservice. It's going to create confusion because we're not. This is something that's indescribable. So let's not use words for it. Is that
You can
kind
use
of
words for it, but the problem with words for it is that you putting, let's say any word is just a container, but what
Mhm.
you fill up this container with is going to be dramatically different for you than it is for me. And
right?
if we just start, kind of hitting it against each other, it's going to break, hopefully, well, eventually, and hopefully it's going to merge into something bigger between two of us. That's
Right.
how we share the ideas. That's how we arrive at this third mind. Like you have your mind, I have my mind. So ideally, we're going to mix it up and it becomes something better. So you're kind of learning a different perspective of the same point.
I love that, by the way. That's like at the core of me, whatever it is that's driving me, that is always what I want to have happen, is what you just described. I love that reality.
So James, when you're saying I have resistance, it's not me that have resistance. It is you trying to potentially describe some things and have some sort of consensus with me that those things are valid, those things are objective.
Oh, not valid or objective, mostly that I want to make sure that whatever it is that you're communicating, that I'm hearing it from your perspective. Because it's super easy, especially like with these kinds of the kind of vocabulary that we're using, that I could just take in whatever words you're saying and be like, oh yeah, I totally understand what he's saying right now, when I completely don't. And I feel like, at least for me, that has to do with the core of just willing to be humble in the conversation, just being like, I might not have any idea what Eugene is talking about right now, and I want to make sure that I really understand this
Here you
from
go,
your
James. I mean,
perspective.
you gave me your perspective right now. You said, again, I'm not sure how to kind of interpret it to the fullest degree, but you said you believe in Jesus Christ. That's a statement that has some weight.
Or it doesn't.
Or it doesn't.
If you came and said Jesus Christ was just a man, he's full of crap, he was just some teacher guy, that would have zero impact on me.
What if I told you, James, that I believe that Jesus Christ was actually a mushroom?
I
agree.
I would be really curious about what story led to that belief. Kind of like the lady who was like, the world's going to end in 87 days. At some point, when something is so vastly different than my understanding of a thing, I'm just like, how does that work? Like,
Yeah.
I get really curious because, like, I know, you know what I think it is at some level, we can have a certain level of arrogance about reality, like, oh yeah, I got shit figured out or whatever. And if I am unwilling to understand another person's perspective, I don't know. I think it's happened so many times to me where like this person is a fruit basket, my initial reaction, and then being curious about it, I end up not necessarily agreeing with their perspective, but I end up learning things from
Oh,
them.
James, let me stop you right here. What if I told you that I wasn't joking, that Jesus Christ was a mushroom?
Oh, dude, okay. Explain. I would love to know how that reality makes sense, because that's, I mean, unless like you maybe like my first thought is you grew a mushroom and you named it that. But if it in reality that he was, yeah, how does that work? How does that work? If you're asking me actually, and that's actually something you believe, I want to know how that works, because that's just very far away from the way that I think about. I mean, I have some really strange ideas, I feel like, about Christ and Jesus in general that most of my Christian friends don't really agree with. But that'd be a new one. Yeah. Do you actually? Because if that's a thing and people think that, I want to know how that works. Like, how does that work?
Well, like, again, this is just another perspective. And
Everything is just a perspective. Anybody who believes that they have a
Yeah.
full understanding of the
But
universe
some
is just
people
arrogant.
believe, they truly believe in from their perspective. And when you truly believe in something, you will defend it. Hopefully not to the death, because that will mean that you identify with it. And that
Right.
means the end of this identification will mean the ego death in a sense. And you
Right.
cannot afford that. And
You
that's
cannot
what you cannot afford ego death. It's painful.
Well, unless you've already gone through it to some level. I think my my suicide attempt kind of.
And that's why Jesus Christ is a mushroom, but not just any mushroom, psychedelic mushroom.
He's a psychedelic mushroom. Because he makes you see the world in a different way?
Could be.
If you've got some truth behind that, I want to hear that, because you got me curious now. And if you're like jerking my chin and you don't actually have that, you need to tell me now.
Well, I mean, you take in all the space literally now, trying to kind of make sense of what I'm saying. So there is this
How do you mean?
historian, I think his name was John Allegro. I think that's the
Okay.
guy. And he was studying the scrolls of the Dead Sea. I think that was the thing.
The Dead Sea Scrolls? Okay.
Dead Sea Scrolls. Again, it might be complete nonsense. It might be completely truth. And it's going to go against everything that people stand when they talk about religion. But for example, what is mushroom? You have to really look kind of deeper from different perspectives here. We don't have time into that, but I'm just going to throw it out there so that your curious mind have something to grasp to.
Are you trying to distract me, Eugene? Is that what you're doing? Because you're doing an excellent job if that's the intention.
Another perspective, because
oh, you are.
Distract you from what?
Right there. You did it twice now. Your body language. This right here.
I'm tapping.
You're tapping? Ah, got it.
So
what is the intention of getting me curious about believing that people think that Christ was a mushroom?
The intention is always the same, James. Just like I said to you, you have your way of thinking about things. I have my way of thinking about things. The intention is really that we come empowered from this conversation, that we have something else to consider, another point of view that hasn't been considered before.
Oh, sorry.
And that's a win.
Okay. So empowered. What does empowered look like for you when you say that? What, like, how?
Empowered, enriched.
Got it. Okay. So at the beginning of the conversation, we were talking about kind of like the ocean concept, just rewinding it back to that point where we were a bottle, right? And that consciousness was like the bottle. I think that's where it was. Is we kind of diverged at that point where when you were using that analogy, I wanted to make sure that I understood what you felt like consciousness was. And then what was the there was an intention or a purpose for that analogy before that. Why did we start talking about that one in particular?
Well, there were a lot of things said. I mean, we start discussing consciousness and what it is and what it's not really. And then
right.
to the conclusion of religion, which is making sense of what consciousness is or what reality is from that perspective.
I remember what it was now. It was actually right when Adeline jumped off. I said that we're probably going to be in disagreement around this topic, and it was specifically the way you said that consciousness was a certain like chemical composition, or I don't remember your exact wording, but it was like essentially something was going on with our brain, that there was a certain dang it. I mean, Eugene, what was that when you were saying that? Something about our emotional state or the chemical state of our brain?
Yeah, I was talking about the chemistry, the basic chemistry, that we are so we are basically a container of chemicals that's, you know, kind of flowing, changing. It's a container of cells, chemicals, and we as consciousness experiences the state changes. Like when it changes, that's what you experience.
Mm-hmm.
Part of you kind of have a snapshot of these things at any given time. That's what forms memories. That's what we call as memories. And giving even earlier when I was talking about nervous system, that you actually consciously can change the chemical composition and therefore change the chemical balance within the container of different memories that you have, which are snapshots of certain experiences that you have integrated within your container. So you're able to clean it out. You're able to actually readjust it in a way that everything flows at a better, in a better way. It has this flow, right? And you're familiar with the flow concept of flow, right? And again, there is just so much to explore here. But what I was trying
to get going.
Uh-huh.
I know it's late for you. I picked up several cues and they're like, you need to get going. I mean, it's late. I know it's super late for you if you need to get going. I'm going to keep asking questions, bro, because like I'm really curious about where you are with that.
I'm being completely arrogant asshole right now, and I'm curious where it all leads me, because it's 1 o'clock and I'm still surprised that I'm still able to be that coherent and get my point across. So yeah, I mean, the point of this, and you might feel like we have a disagreement, James. I don't feel like I disagree with you at any point. Like there is no disagreement here whatsoever. In fact,
I need to work on that, man. I should have reframed that. I think I have an internal like knee-jerk reaction to be like, well, yeah. I think I'm doing it at some level because I'm curious about where this person is, and I feel like if I say I disagree, that identity is going to kind of like flare up in that, right? Like this is who this person is, and they're going to be straight and honest with me about where they're going and what they believe about whatever that is. But mostly when I'm saying I disagree with that, actually internally what I'm thinking is I'm really curious about what he thinks is going on in that situation.
well,
because I feel like we have very different.
That's why you're one of the smartest guys around. You're open to another people's perspective, yet you have very strong sense of boundaries and how much you're willing to take it in, and at the same time, it's like you like expressing your opinions, you like being heard, and this is something that drives you. That's why you love people. That's why you love experiencing other environments that people create when they engage in conversation with you. And a lot of people might probably find some of the things that you talk about maybe a little bit off-putting, because you have a very strong sense of like, you need to say this, don't put words in my mouth, like this is my my boundaries. I need to be very clear of where I'm coming from, where it's going, and if not, I'm going to punish you. But the punishment does not come from the bad place. It's coming from the place of like, I feel like you need to be corrected here. It feels like you're looking at it from the kind of a point that's limiting you. Again, that's just my cold reading of how I
awesome.
perceive.
And actually what I'm working on, because internally what's happening is not that this person needs to be corrected. It's more of like, that's how I'm reacting, as if this person needs to be corrected. But internally what I'm like is like, okay, this person has a very different viewpoint than I do. What am I missing? Because I'm so used to being able to step into other people's shoes and understand their perspective that when something sounds so very different than where I'm coming from, I am like, I am missing something in what Eugene is saying in this moment. And I need to let him know that I disagree, because I want to understand his perspective on this, and I can't right now.
Yeah. James, I want to give floor to Daniel. He's been observing and yawning here, like
He just made a face.
Yeah, no. He sniped me. He got me good. He got me to shut up. He's that's what he is. He's an assertive asshole. And it's interesting.
Me right now,
no, you and I noticed when he says I'm looking to understand, he like touches his mouth, and it's like, no, he's not looking to understand. He's looking to impose his opinions, and I mean that's what it is. Yeah, I'm not here to judge. I think it was fascinating. It feels interesting being put in my place. Rarely happens, so I'm comfortable. I'm chilling.
What happened, Dan? I missed something somewhere.
Yeah, when and I'm sure I probably did something to you to trigger you, for you to retaliate when I was going to say something. You're like, no, I want to hear Adeline. Adeline can remember what she was going to say. Like,
that moment.
Yeah, I just like, it would have took me 3 seconds, and it would have not like taken things off course like you do. It was going to be related to that, and then she was gonna. So yeah, like you impose it. You have your ways, and you're not really looking to understand. You're looking to get them to understand you. if you really want to understand, you would paraphrase.
I do.
Not-
Actually, the frame of this, by the way, Dan, I don't know if you remember, but in this conversation was Adeline and I were going to jump on the call because I said I wanted to continue the conversation with her. And you said you were willing to start the call. So the context of what we were continuing was actually the conversation with Adeline. And that was the third time that like somebody had asked her something and we had talked over her. And I was watching that pattern happen where I was watching her shut down because something would be asked of her and then someone else would talk.
No, you're
So-
you're a hero. As somebody said, you're a hero. You're the smartest guy. You notice unfairness with Adeline, no one letting her talk, people jumping on her, and you stepped in like Captain America, and you saved the day. But just to let you know, I've been feeling nothing but resentment and like just
Oh, shit.
anger.
I'm sorry,
And
bro.
like,
I'm sorry, man.
yeah.
Thank you for letting me know, dude. I honestly, that means a lot that you're willing to even share that with me because I do. I'll do that sometimes, and
No, so
I'm shit
I'm
at
wondering,
it.
like, where did I trigger you? Where did I disrespect? I know I've had to disrespected you probably in Kate's class. It came from somewhere. It doesn't.
Oh no, dude,
It
it
came from
wasn't.
somewhere.
I didn't. It was in the context of that. It was. Adeline sounded like she was struggling with something, and I felt like
I was being a
had-
bully.
no, I don't think you were being bully. I thought you were just wanting to share. Like we're all assertives in here, and we have a tendency of like just kind of projecting our thoughts or ideas into the space. And Adeline is not an assertive. And you know what I think it might come from is this happens to my wife a lot, where she's not an assertive, and she'll be in a situation where she has thoughts or something she'd like to share, and she's in a group of assertives, and it's like a knee jerk reaction for me now to be like, hey, is it okay if she answers? Because non-assertives, they won't communicate, and we all were, all of us are assertives, and I was wanting to make sure that she had an opportunity to do that, and I was watching it happen, like where she wasn't being able to. So I'm sorry, man. I wasn't meaning to disrespect you at all.
Oh no,
It was
look,
I
I'm
was
Darth
just-
Vader for a reason. I'm a bully, and you
You're
did
not
the
a-
right thing. You stepped in, and you're like, no, let her talk, guys. She is helpless here.
not
I'm going
helpless.
to help her. I'm going to help her. I'm going to clear the stage for her. I'm such a good guy. I'm such a Christian Bible thumper. I'm going to help here, and I'm going to rescue her. That's what
sorry,
it came
man.
off.
I'm
Okay,
sorry,
guys.
man.
This is what
Yeah.
I'm seeing here.
What do you see,
gonna be
Gene?
dark later. Okay, so both of you are triggered in some way, which is absolutely fine. So I think it was it's a sense of control for to have a control of conversation, to have a control of time. And some of you are stepping on each other's shoes. Like James, James likes to put his words out. James, just for you, it may sound harsh. Like, be really careful when you talk. You're not listening and you're not observing. So it's harder to see what's happening around you when you're talking because you're engaged in your thought processes. You're passionate about them. You're driving this energy forward. For a lot of people, maybe not for a lot, but for some people, that might be offensive. Because like Dan, when he's a leader of the group, he wants to be there in the spot. That's his role. Now he don't want to be challenged. Sometimes he would allow it, and that's fine. But some other times it feels challenging for them, like he's being challenged, and he going to call you out on this. Now he's calling you out not because you're bad, mean, or because he's bad or mean, but he's actually trying to drive his point home that there is some dynamic that you, James, involved in that you're not seeing right now.
Mm-hmm.
And you're starting to see it right now. We're coming to mock negotiation practices, and you're seeing, and I pointed out to you the first time I saw you, like I said, there's some incongruency between what you say and what you do during the mock negotiation practice.
Right.
That was,
You're absolutely right.
And there was
Just so
no
you
bad.
know, like what you're talking about is actually the reason why I'm here. What you guys are communicating about right now and the way in which I talk. I started coming specifically to this because I was giving similar feedback from my wife and other people, and I was like, okay, I'm shit at communicating in this area, and I need to be in a space where people are going to be direct and honest with me. So please understand, like you guys sharing this with me is exactly why I'm here, and I'm really thankful.
The question is, James, like now that you're aware of this, now you're going to be judged 2 times as hard by us.
Oh, which is
And
fine.
well,
Honestly, the difficult element is not the judgment. And also, Eugene, I'm not actually triggered right now at all. I'm feeling like an asshole and shitty for doing that to Dan, and
that's the part of being
because I'm a
triggered. It's not
well,
about
I guess I don't feel flooded. I feel like self-judgment doesn't necessarily mean, because if I'm triggered or I'm flooded,
You're like a
I
machine.
will. No, I'm just. It was the thing that I talked about earlier. When I'm presence, I'm consciousness. I'm none of the words that are coming out of my mouth. So it's really difficult to trigger me.
James. Whenever you talk, whenever you produce sound, you cannot be present.
Sure, you can.
No, you cannot.
Okay.
It's
Well, this is our previous conversation about like that we're a state of mind. If I'm consciousness or presence and I'm empty space, my brain and my mouth are making words, but I can be watching what I'm doing. I can be watching the words that are coming out of my mouth. I missed Dan and what happened, and I'm sorry, man. That was a shit thing for me to do. I didn't mean to do that. I was focused on Adeline because I had communicated with her around that, and I was not being present with anybody else in the group, and that was a dick thing to do, man. And I'm sorry. I hope you can accept my apology.
Well, no, I'm not into apologies. No, I mean, it is
Okay.
what it is. Like, it is what it is. But it's about just moving forward.
Okay.
Moving
How does one
forward.
make amends with Dan when someone has wronged him? Because, dude, I care about you, man. You're a friend and you're in my space, and I appreciate, like, you don't want an apology. Please help me understand do.
Say what?
I get that you don't like apologies, so I cannot do that. But if you could please help me understand what I can do moving forward, I would appreciate that.
Just I mean, Eugene, is there any medication for to soothe the ego, reduce ego, or is that?
Oh,
'Cause
guys,
it's about ego. It's I got one. Eugene's probably the only one that has like the least amount. To be fair, and I know I'm probably in the wrong in this, and it's gonna take me like a day or two to take accountability of it. So I'm gonna apologize in the future because it's gonna hit me probably like a ton of bricks.
I don't think you did anything wrong, Dan.
I
really
got triggered.
don't.
I got triggered.
Well, that's not you doing anything wrong.
then it's
That's
still triggered.
you've got
You're just
some kind of like
triggered.
history or something that's triggering you, and
yeah,
that's
yeah.
not your fault.
Well, Eugene knows recently I got triggered by someone else that's smarter than me for sure, and I show up to learn, and then they just what's the word I'm looking for? They just like brush you to the side, like, hey, huh?
Abused you.
Yeah, kind of like that. I'm like, you know what? I'm not gonna. I mean, I can tolerate it. I'm gonna speak up. I'm at that point now where I'm just gonna say what I felt instead of just. But with that one, I was just like, yeah, I'm done. I'm out. The disrespect was just too much. Like, I'm trying to be as biggest humble pie as possible. It's tough.
But some people are more humble than you are, right?
And then that's the other problem. Is like, damn it, man, they're more humble than me. Like, damn it, James just went into super humble mode. Like, he's so competitive. Like, what the fuck, there's no.
What the hell is humility anyway? What does that mean?
Yeah, this guy,
It's just like,
he out humbled me. He gave me an apology. Like, what the fuck do I do with that?
Well,
cash it in.
I can't apologize for apologizing. I think that would make it worse.
Oh, that was fascinating, guys. Thank you for indulging me in this midnight banter.
Literally a meat night, bunch of sausages.
Oh boy. Yeah, I mean, again, thank you guys for
Thank
going through this. And again, we can consider this as a negotiation. If someone get triggered, fantastic. Like, this is a safe sandbox to experience those unconscious responses to some of the things. I'm touching my nose, to some of the things that we all experience. For me, I don't know, I cannot hold it. For me, it's the laughter. And it's not laughter from the bad position. It's just, it is, I don't know, it's gonna sound offensive. It's amusing, and not in a bad way, but it's like seeing kids fight, because I believe that we all like kids locked up in adults' bodies. Yeah. And you kind of, you played for some sort of a toy, and now you're just pulling this toy left and right. And, that's what I'm seeing my kids do. And this is what I'm seeing adults do. And we all do that from time to time. So it's just become endearing, sort of a way, kind of a thing. And if we can all learn from that, well, fantastic. So
Yeah, totally.
All right,
with
gentlemen,
that being said,
you guys ready? I'll delete the recording. That was it's too much personal stuff in it. Unless you guys wanted to review, I'm happy to send it over.
You're more than welcome to, man. I like I said, when I make mistakes, I appreciate it when they're being pointed out. I can't grow. At the end of all of this, I'm here to be the best husband and father I can be, and I can't do that shit without like people being honest with me. So I'm really grateful, and if that could help somebody else at some
You know what I
point,
think? I had an epiphany. I think you've been surrounded with a lot of yes men.
no, not really. I'm gonna mostly because I seek out people who are willing to tell me no, and I value them. So most of my really close friends are constantly willing to call me on my shit. They're the people that I love. Like my two closest friends, John and Pat, they're constantly calling me on my shit, and I love those people because they're willing to. I don't like yes people in general. They bug me because
Which one's the atheist one?
That's Chris Moulton, is my drinking buddy from high school.
I mean, I think that's fascinating to have a atheist friend when you're so religious. I mean, that as Eugene said earlier, you have an ability to juggle different perspectives. That shows a high level of intelligence. No one's no one's calling you dumb or nothing. You're probably one of the smartest dudes in the whole group, in the whole community.
I don't think my intelligence has anything to do with me. It's if anything is being smart, I have my brain that God gifted me with, but mostly I'm just awareness. Everything else is pretend. I'm making everything else, like my brain is making everything else up. I think that's one of the reasons why getting triggered is generally fairly hard, because none of it's me. It's all, I mean, when my brain is doing something, I feel like I need to take responsibility for it. So like me saying that to you, Dan, it's like, okay, my brain just did something super fucked up to a person that I care about. I need to take responsibility for that. I need to apologize for that. Okay, God, he doesn't like apologies. How do you make amends to a friend that doesn't like apologies? Okay, that's new. I need to know how to do that, which I asked you, and I still don't have an answer for. So there's going to be a part of me that you've definitely got on a line because I don't know how to. I want to make that right.
You know
And
what it is?
until-
The secret works for me. Use an accusation audit.
Okay.
Hey Dan, hey, you're probably gonna think I'm trying to be Captain America here by rescuing Adeline. Would you be against letting her get the stage here for 10 minutes? I'll be like, dude, no problem, man. Yeah, I'm the one. You know, I wanted you guys. I wanted to observe the dialogue, and I got too caught up in it. Yeah.
Which is an area that I suck at right now. The accusation audits and the no-oriented questions. There's some part of my psychology that has an issue with that. And I haven't. They are, yeah.
all right,
Okay.
gentlemen.
Thank you.
Good night, Eugene. See ya.
Great talking with you guys. Sorry to keep you up so late, Eugene.
Later.
No